Having done FIFA vs PES videos for the past several years, I often get asked which one's better, and I've never given a categoric answer of one over the other. This video is a perfect example of why I don't, as we compare two game modes that in theory are the same, but each game has its own way of doing it, and it's all down to the player's preference. So if you've never tried the manager mode on either FIFA or PES, here's a rundown of the way it is in both games, and you can draw your own conclusions as to which one fits you best. Let's start from the beginning with creating a new manager mode, and at first glance both games are the same. We can choose match times, difficulty, currency and things like that, but as we get to the manager creation screen, on the FIFA side you can choose between a few face templates and whether you wear a suit, shirt and tie or a tracksuit. On the other side in PES, you have the same exact creation system as you would for creating a player, which is a huge advantage because you can customize your manager exactly the way you want. Next up, we get to select the team we want to start managing, and personally, I think I speak for a lot of people that the joy of this game mode is starting with a lower league team and working your way up through several seasons and try to turn them into world beaters. So for me, I support Chelsea, but when I play career mode in FIFA, I will go for a club like AFC Wimbledon so I can start up in the 3rd English division and work my way up. Now, why did I bring this up? Well, because now that we go over to the PES side in choosing your team, and yes, PES doesn't have as many leagues and sub-tiers as FIFA. They do have second divisions in a couple of countries including England. Now when we choose our team, we get two options to either start with real squads or Master League original lineups, where any team you choose, whether it's a top side or a low one, will have the exact same 1.5 star team, and if it's in a league that has a second division, it would also start in a lower tier. That means I can play with Chelsea and actually start from the bottom in the championship with very low rated players and work my way up. Let's move on to the bread and butter of this game mode, transfers. In FIFA, you'll have a transfer budget that you use to pay for buying players from other teams and a wage budget that you'll use to pay their salaries, and you can freely adjust the ratio between them if you need one more than the other. In PES, you will have the same two types of budget breakdown with a major difference. You cannot adjust between them, and this does get to be a real problem. You can change it so the money that you earn will go into the budget that you want, but you'll still find yourself after a while with way more money than you need in your transfer funds, but your salary wage is low. It's happened to me that I was on the verge of signing that next big player, my new superstar, and I had triple the money that I needed for his transfer, but I couldn't afford his salary, so I just had to wait for a while for ticket sales so I can complete the deal. And I was lucky because if you take too long, the player will lose interest. On to actually making the deal happen. In FIFA, we'll have a cutscene when we first start negotiating with the team's manager, and after they agree to our terms, we have the next cutscene to negotiate with the player himself for the contract. On the PES side, you submit your offer for the manager and player contract at the same time, and you'll see your chance percentage for each of them agreeing. While we're talking about transfers, I'm just gonna quickly mention a smaller thing, but still something that would matter to some people. The transfer values and fees are very different between the games. FIFA's will reflect real life's overinflated football market, whereas PES will have very good deals for even the top players. I'm just saying that maybe it doesn't affect you, but it took me a bit to get used to it, so yeah, just something to keep in mind. Another pivotal aspect of career mode is actually getting to develop your players. For me personally, it's the most satisfying part when I've put in the work with a young player and turned them into a world-class star. FIFA's growth system is pretty linear in essence. All players experience a growth spurt on the first of each month, and the stats that get developed have mostly to do with players' performance for the previous month, but other aspects such as the player's position, overall stat distribution and playtime do have an impact as well. In PES, the system is massively different in that you get to choose what you want to train your players in from a list of player mold templates, or even allocate the skills yourself. Another key difference is that player growth happens continuously, your squad gaining stat experience each day, especially from game time, and you'll slowly see those stats getting close to increasing. But when we talk about player growth, we also need to look at limitations. People refer to it as growth potential even in real life football. In other words, the ability ceiling that a player can reach. In FIFA, we have this as hard-coded and extremely linear. Each player has an overall set rating potential, and no matter what you do, they cannot grow past it. You can only impact how quickly they grow towards it. Also, in certain stats such as weak foot ability and skill move ability, they can never be trained past the base values. This leads me into PES, and it's again very different growth system. At first glance, players will seemingly have predictable limited potential, but in this game you can actually dramatically turn a would-be average player into one of the world's best by simply having them perform well on a consistent basis. The way this happens, and for every Master League player out there, you'll already know this image. It's one of the most exciting things that can happen in this game mode in PES. Basically, one of your players that has had several good performances in the bag will trigger an event saying that they're showing great promise. What this system means is that the player is about to receive a dramatic speed up in stat growth over the coming month, most of the time going up by 3 to 4 overall ratings in that short amount of time. And this is real growth. You'll actually feel the player changed in a month, going from a sideliner to a starting 11 tier player under your very eyes. It is with this system that PES is most different to FIFA, and personally I do like it a lot. It feels that your players are getting rewarded for actually performing well instead of reaching world-class status by just sitting on the bench every game as long as they have a high set potential. Now that we've covered player growth in both games, it is fitting that we discuss another top feature, especially for die-hard fans of this game mode: finding young players through the academy and turning them into the next big thing. So let's first look at how FIFA does it. You first go through hiring a scout. The experience level will affect the number of players he finds, and judgment affects the quality. You can scout players through many different countries, being specific of certain positions you want to look for. You can also specify the player mold that you're interested in. Then on the exact same day that you sent your scout, on the upcoming months, you'll get a report of the players that fit your criteria. These will be randomly generated players with varying stats, the mother lode being finding those with over 90 potential, 95 being the most they can have. You can hold them in your youth academy where they will already start developing, and you can choose to promote them to the senior team whenever you want as long as they're over 16 years old. Before showing you the PES equivalent, we must first address the system of regen players. You'll understand why later. So what are regen players in FIFA? Basically, when a player retires, the game will replace them with a new young player that will have the same potential, nationality, position, and work rates, and they will be spawned in the last league that the real player was in before retiring. What you're looking at right now is my personal career mode save, and this is Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi's regens. As you see, the stats are completely random, including weak foot, skill moves, and height, so they don't reflect the base player's type at all. Now, let's get to PES. Why did I need to cover regens beforehand? Well, because in PES, the youth academy and regen system are one and the same. You can't look for youth players and have them spawn from thin air. They will join your academy at set times, and they will all be a player that has already retired the season before. If you're a FIFA player and this sounds confusing, basically when those big names retire, they will always come back as teenagers with lower stats, but everything from appearance, traits, and all of their likeness remaining. This can actually be very exciting, so that even if you start with a lower team, you can one day have a team full of superstars that you've actually signed and trained since they were teenagers. Now, the way you get these players in your academy is a bit random, seems to be tied to the overall quality of your team, so you won't get those big names in your own academy in the first few seasons, but that's alright. This is what I do, and it feels like Christmas morning. Whenever the game tells you that the youth squad has been updated, of course, first check the new names and see if there's anyone worthwhile, but then you go to the transfer market and look for 16-year-old players. Retired players always get added in waves, and they always spawn as 16 years old. So then if it's a good month, you'll find a big name player that is now a kid and easy to sign. These two different systems have their advantages and disadvantages. With FIFA, once you're well into the future, players will all be fictitious and it will feel like your world. A sandbox where the new Messi is some kid named Walter. The disadvantage is that some of these players will feel very hollow, either with a bad appearance generated or poor skill move and weak foot stats for their positions, or just that they don't look like the new Ronaldo and more like a Sunday League player that's also a part-time cab driver. The system in PES has its own pros and cons. The good side being, again, getting to grow these big names yourself from teenage years, and even though you've started with a low team, you can have a star-packed squad in the future. The big disadvantage is that it does ruin the immersion, that instead of what I said in FIFA, where it feels like you're in the future and the meaning behind those random names is the value that you've yourself put behind them, instead of that, the future of Master League in PES will be the same real players retiring and coming back over and over like one big football purgatory. The final big point of discussion will be the continuity of the game mode. By that I mean, if you're a started at the bottom now we're here type of career mode player like myself, you'll go through many seasons doing the same things repeatedly, playing games, growing players and all of that. This can get boring and repetitive, so how does each game fight against that? Unfortunately, I feel like this is the biggest point FIFA is lacking in. I mean, how many press conferences do you have to simulate to really not care about it? Or most of the lore drama, the stories being told, are in the game events that are very easy to miss. Sometimes I find genuinely interesting things in the news section that I wouldn't have seen had I not gone there myself on purpose. I feel like they should have it more in your face and contain more worthwhile things. Also, the players interacting with you is very dated as well. It doesn't feel real, it doesn't feel genuine, and it has no draw to make you care. And other than that, hitting on the repetitiveness again, between transfer windows there is little to keep you engaged. Nothing happens that is exciting. Sure, your players grow every month, and that's the one thing that keeps me interested most of the time, but other times I can't even be bothered going through a very packed schedule that month just to reach the first of next month. So if that's one of FIFA's biggest problems in the game mode, how does PES do it better? Well, first of all, the event display or news section, whatever you want to call it, is much more relevant in PES. I myself scroll through all of the stories every single time to find out what's going on. Most of the time, I admit I'm looking for the player that shows great promise, or it's just a simple news section saying that your top goal scorer is on fire and that the fans are expecting him to score in this next game. And just things like that are better presented to you in PES, even if most of them will indeed get repetitive and don't all matter in the greater scheme of things. It's all about the presentation. Another quite simple but great system to keep things fresh and interesting in PES is player roles. Your team will go through different statuses that actually affect the gameplay, and it is a good reason in itself to want to keep playing. These player roles can be something like youth prospect when you've promoted an academy player and given them game time, and are now going through these ranks getting more and more efficient with each new role. You have other player roles where a player designates you as their mentor and get better at training under your wing, or even harder to get player roles like star player, which actually has an effect on your cash flow where you receive a bonus each month, or a player that has been playing at the top of their game for many years and has reached the status of legend. All of these things keep it interesting and keep you engaged to push for things other than transfers and trophies. A pretty basic way to keep you playing and to give you goals is the board of directors that give you objectives in both games, and I don't want to spend too much time on that as it's really not that deep. You get an objective and whether you complete it affects your job security. FIFA is being a little bit more complex. I also want to quickly mention the way you appreciate how big your club is, especially if you do start from the bottom. I mean, other than the obvious way to tell by how highly rated your squad is, how does the game evaluate your club size? In PES, it is a simple ranking system that places you on a scale with every single club in the game, and you can slowly see yourself going up the ranks to be a contender for the #1 spot. I do like this system, but I also like the one in FIFA where you can actually check your club's total worth. This has felt very rewarding to me personally when I started with AFC Wimbledon and they were only worth a few £1,000,000 and are now a billionaire tier club. Anyway, that brings us to the end of this comparison. I tried to go as in-depth as possible without going on for too long. Hopefully I haven't missed any important aspects, and like I said in the beginning, each game is different and whichever is better is solely up to you, or you can enjoy both for their individual strengths. If you've only played one of them before, then I hope I've given you enough information about the other one to know what it is about and if you want to try it out. But for now, thank you guys for watching. I've been Shade, goodbye.